Welcome to the second part of this video series about CoachMaster software. My name is Bob Griffiths and I've created this series of videos using real coaching issues to illustrate how CoachMaster can support coaches as they actually run sessions. If you saw the first part of the video called Karen Part 1, you will have seen me working with a young mother we have called Karen, who has some issues getting her children out of the house in the morning. We completed the goal and session goal part of the coaching process, and now we are moving on to the reality stage. You might have also seen that Karen has given me a lot of information about herself and the family dynamics. At this point, I had no real idea if I was going to be able to help her, but I had a lot of faith in the grow process and was very curious how the session would play out. There is a common misunderstanding about the R for reality stage in the grow coaching model on which this particular process is based that I wanted to highlight for you. The misunderstanding is that the R, which does stand for reality, is in some way to determine if the goal is realistic. This is not the case. The R is to determine where the client is in relation to the goal. So for example, if a client had a goal to earn $100,000 a year, their current reality, the R, would be what they were earning at the moment. So I choose to start with these general questions. And this particular question about what is currently happening in relation to the problem issue. But I change it to reflect more closely the goal that Karen set about speaking more quietly and her heart rate during journeys. I was hopeful of getting a simple reality statement from the question. What happens, as you can see, is that we get a complex statement from Karen about all the things that go wrong before she leaves the house that cause her heart rate to rise and her not to be speaking quietly. Technically, at this point, a coach might go back and redefine the goal into one about getting out of the house calmly, but I thought this was not necessary. I then send an encouraging statement to Karen, even though what she said was not what I was hoping for, and freeformed a question to ask about some more information about the situation because I was not clear what was actually happening. And you will see that Karen does not answer my question, but gives me a load more information about what happens and how she responds to it, which is all useful but makes the coaching a bit more complex. I then try this question in the frequency section to see if there are any exceptions to this pattern. This is often a very useful question because it helps the client see that the issue is not as black and white as they believe. But Karen comes back with even more information about her children and how the older child did not want to go to school. At this point, I was wondering whether this was a coaching issue at all, and if I could make any impression on what were obviously some very complex family dynamics in a relatively short period of time. But I've learned that this place of confusion can often occur in coaching, even with the best of intentions and a sound process, and I can often find myself in a place where I nor the client have much idea about where we're going. Although I was not speaking to Karen, I was picking up a picture of someone who was very frustrated. I was observing the tone of the words she used, for instance, furious, flapping around, giving instructions, mucking about. All these words are telling me that Karen is probably very frustrated by the situation, and it seemed important to give her space to vent her frustrations rather than try and force a proper coaching conversation. By that I mean to try and insist that she answers my questions. My main concern was now that she was so much in her own world about how frustrated she was and how difficult the situation was that we would not be able to work together. I decided to try another question from the frequency section about when the issues first arose, as that often brings more information to the client if they are very caught up in the frustrations of the present. I softened it to take out the references to problems and issues. Again, Karen does not answer this question directly, but provides more information about her son. I was interested in what the journey was like when she only had one son. Karen responds with more information about her inner world and hating to be interrupted when she is on a mission. She also tells me about how both her sons muck around. I'm sure that many people can now see a pattern in what is happening here. However Karen is reacting to her son's behaviour, it's not working, and indeed she could be making the situation worse. So I ask about her reaction. She tells me she asks them to focus. I'm not sure what this means or how it would be interpreted by a 6-year-old. She then sort of implies she yells it at them, and I start to see a pattern of them misbehaving winding her up to the point she yells, which works temporarily, and then the cycle happening all over again. Rather than point this out to Karen directly, I try asking her if this approach is working. She acknowledges she is stuck in a negative cycle, and I briefly review the solutions questions, but they don't seem appropriate. So I try these questions from the sensory awareness section about where her attention is at the moment. The reason I asked these questions was I was pretty sure she was focusing on how difficult her sons were being and how frustrated she felt. She came back telling me she feels frustrated and a failure, which is a pretty hard burden to wear. I did not want to be unsympathetic, but I was aware that she would not be able to change anything by repeating the same patterns. So I wanted to help her get to a place where she could change her behaviour to get a different result, and we were certainly not there yet. Then we have a slightly confusing point where Karen repeats her point and I repeat my question because I thought she had not received the original question. The reason I left this in is just as in real conversations, in online environments, there is probably even more opportunity for misunderstanding and confusion. But if you handle it gracefully as a coach, there is no lasting damage. I now take a moment to review all the information that Karen has provided in this section. And as you can see, there's quite a lot. I didn't think there was much value in trying to go deeper into all the information at this stage, so the best thing to do was to summarise where we'd got to. I picked up most of the information and cut and pasted it into the summary, which Karen agreed to. I hoped it would be useful for her to just see the pattern laid out in front of her, as sometimes people are so caught up in the drama of situations they can't see the wood for the trees. Karen agrees that the summary is accurate, and we were then ready to move on to the obstacles section. I briefly review the general questions and decide, because of all the information that Karen has given me about how she is part of the pattern, it would be more useful to look at the obstacles within the client section straight away. Now, when using this section, it's very important to be careful that you don't make the client feel blamed for the situation, but you encourage them to take responsibility for their actions so that they can change them. So I politely check with Karen if she's prepared to change her responses. I try and keep the dialogue conversational, even though we are texting. So I say, a fairly basic question, but I should check. It might not be the most elegant way to put it, but it shows there's a real human being on the other end. Karen tells me very emphatically yes, which I acknowledge. She then tells me that she finds it easier to cope with her daughter. Now at this point it would be very easy to start examining the dynamics between a single mother and why she finds her sons difficult and her daughter easier, but that's getting close to therapy. Instead, I soften this question about personal patterns and characteristics and make it more focused on what Karen has told me about her sons. We immediately get some great obstacle information about how she hates conflict, being sidetracked, and doing pointless things. This is gold dust in terms of helping her see her role in the situation. So I ask her how these tendencies could affect what happens with the boys. I just freeform a question about how her attitudes and beliefs might be affecting the situation. She gives me more useful information about how she tries to be accommodating and it does not work, and also some information about her childhood, which has some resonance for her in the current situation. Mentally, I was picking up a picture of Karen every morning, trying to be accommodating, hoping it would work, and when it didn't work, getting frustrated, yelling "focus" at the boys, feeling like a failure, and the cycle repeating day after day. I validate her for being so honest, and she tells me that she likes to solve problems. I assure her we will look at the solutions in a minute, but I want to help her see a bit deeper what's going on now, so I ask if her basic belief about accommodating people could be part of the problem. She tells me yes and gives me some very insightful comments about it and her family dynamics. I compliment her on her insight, which is again a kind of human touch that's very important, and ask what cooperation she would need from the boys. You'll notice that she doesn't completely answer the question, but gives me some more information about how she expects, hopes the boys will relate to her, even when they do not, which again reinforces what I'm hearing, that she hopes one day the boys will change and just see the world the way she does. I then review all the information that Karen has given me. Again, you can see it is quite a lot, and I attempt to summarize it. I might not have captured everything, but I think I have enough to help Karen see the patterns. Note that I ask anything else at the end, which invites the client to amend or add to the summary. Karen comes back with even more information about how she has tried to change things, tries to reason with the children, feels a failure compared to her friend, and how she likes to do things for her children. This information was going to be useful in the next section on options, and I didn't want to lose it, but I didn't want to get into it in the obstacles stage. This illustrates one of the skills of a coach needed when using the GROW model. You have to focus on getting the information you need for that particular stage, whilst being aware that you may have been given information relevant to the other stages. The way to deal with this is to note the information, don't make the client feel wrong or bad for giving it, but don't engage with it right now. I ask her if her attempts to avoid stress could be adding to the problem, i.e. another obstacle. She agrees they are, and I use this with my previous summary to paste into the obstacles tab. And with some relief, I was ready to go on to the next stage.